Welcome to another debate. Today we'll be reviving a classic. The claim is morality is objective. We'll begin with the affirmative steelmanning the negative position.
Right. Yeah. So there are many strong ideas to think that morality is not an external, mind-independent standard, but something humans construct with reasoning, biology, or social cooperation. Moral judgments seem to track with the needs of people and their environments, whether it be cooperation, reciprocity, protecting children. These sort of traits seem to be what help the human race survive, especially early on. Morality in this case seems to look a lot less cosmic, a lot less divine. There's no divine truth, and it's more like an adaptive strategy shaped by natural selection. So we don't need an external moral law to explain why helping your group feels right and why betraying them feels wrong. Right? Our brains have developed to make it feel that way. Massive culture variation seems to suggest that there is no fixed morality. What one culture deems wrong, another culture might consider normal or even virtuous. And if there was an objective moral law, we would expect a little more uniformity. When people appeal to objective morality, their conclusions differ drastically. Religious traditions degree sharply on this, or disagree sharply on this, on different issues, whether it be war, marriage, gender roles, whatever it be. Other people using the same evidence, reach opposite moral conclusions. So the best explanation is not that one group has access to some invisible moral realm while the others don't, but that humans actually construct moral norms through reasoning and negotiation. We don't need morality to be a cosmic law in order for it to be guide behavior. Saying morality is constructed doesn't make it arbitrary or meaningless. It simply means it's created by humans for humans, just like a language or law or government. So the weight is then on the defender of objective morality to provide a reason for objective morality and why we need to transcend moral standard when it can be explained perfectly well otherwise.
Good. Okay, great. Now, Josh, do you feel like that was a fair representation of maybe your position or why
Yeah,
objective
definitely.
morality is not a thing?
Yep. Very solid.
All right, man. Then we're going to go ahead and start with your steelmanning.
Okay, so there's a couple different angles from it. One of them is kind of uh, you say, well, you know, to even care to make the argument in the first place, you must be grounding in some kind of objective morality because you can't really make an argument against objective morality because then it's why are you even making the argument? If there's no such thing as objective morality, why would you even do such a thing? This is sort of a logical thing. And then there's certain properties of the universe which are constant beyond even culture and evolution. So like logic, there's certain logical moral rules like um, the imperative of morality. I forget exactly what it's called, but that you do things so that everybody in a system can also do the same thing and it works. Um, and these things are systematic, therefore fundamental to logic. Um, And then there's also maybe an argument of like archetypes that there's uh, certain intrinsic archetypes, Jungian archetypes that ground morality, and then um, perhaps a theistic argument. I'm not sure. Some people make that, but I'm not sure if I actually hit any of your actual arguments there.
Cam, was that a fair representation of your position, do you feel?
Yeah, I feel like that was fair.
Now we will go into the opening statements. Each participant has 5 minutes.
Cool. So just to define some terms, objective is a truth or standard that is real and valid, independent of any individual's beliefs, feelings, or cultural preferences. And morality is a set of principles about what humans ought to do, what is right, wrong, good, evil, just, and unjust. And there are many versions of non-objective morality, but I think they all share one problem. None of them can generate binding moral obligations that apply to everyone, regardless of preference or agreement. None can deliver a real ought. Moral truths hold everywhere, and we can see this in three ways. The basic law is written on the heart of people. People across cultures recognize the same core moral principles, whether it be justice, honesty, courage. Culture may shape how people understand morality, but it cannot create morality. The moral law exists before any cultural interpretation. Two, cultural disagreements doesn't disprove objectivity. Aquinas would say that people can err in moral reasoning because of ignorance, bad teaching, or corrupt traditions, but errors don't eliminate the truth. Just like past people were wrong about the shape of the earth, yet the earth still had an objective shape. Cultures can't be wrong about morality while truth remains objective. And third, if morality came from culture, absurd consequences would follow. If society creates morality, no culture could ever be wrong about slavery, racism, or genocide. Abolitionists and reformers would always be immoral by definition, and there'd be no such thing as moral progress, only moral change. But we do judge cultures as wrong, and that only makes sense if there's a standard above culture. The alternatives, morality based on culture, consensus, or agreement, can tell us what people believe, but never what is actually right. These don't explain why we are bound to follow what is moral. For that, we need a source of obligation. An obligation only exists if there's an objective standard of good. All the non-objective theories, whether based on culture, preference, evolution, agreements, they can describe moral feelings or norms, but they cannot explain why anyone ought to obey them when they disagree. Evolution explains behavior. It doesn't explain obligation. It tells us what promotes survival, but survival is not the same as moral goodness. Society tells us what people agree on, but not what is actually right. Agreement doesn't create truth, and the majority is often catastrophically wrong. A changing culture cannot produce unchanging moral duties. And the individual preference collapses morality into just opinion. If each person defines morality, it just becomes your truth versus my truth. If there's no objective good grounding our obligations, then the word evil just becomes empty. Evil is only meaningful if there's a real objective good that it falls short of. To say something is evil, you must compare it to some standard of good. And without that standard, the word evil just falls into a personal dislike, because evil is just a lack or corruption of something that is good. Now, this is the classical privation view you might have heard. Evil is real, but it only exists as a distortion of something originally good. You remove cancer from the body, you get a healthier body. You remove the body from cancer, you get nothing. It doesn't work. Cancer depends on the good body. Likewise, evil depends on the existence of good. You can't call anything evil without an objective standard. If morality is subjective or culture-based, no action can be objectively evil, because what are we measuring it against? No society can be wrong, because they're wrong compared to what? You can't know what a crooked stick looks like unless you have some idea of what a straight stick looks like. So without objective good, evil just becomes opinion, no different from taste. If good is just personal or cultural preference, saying genocide is wrong is no different than saying you like McDonald's and I think In-N-Out is better. But we all believe that some things, like torturing babies, the Holocaust, they're not just personally upsetting, right? But it's actually evil. And the moment you say something is more moral than these atrocities, you have to compare those actions to something outside. You have to compare it to an outside standard. So if there is no objective standard, then ought disappears. And with it, justice, rights, moral responsibility. And that's why objective morality is not only real, but it's inescapable. And that objective morality, I believe, comes from God. I do take that theistic view. So I'm done.
All right. Thank you. Now let's go to Josh's opening statement.
All right. I told my dad I was going to do this debate, and I told him my position was that morality isn't objective, and he said he hopes I lose. So, yeah, either way, I win in this. So, so the argument for non-objective morality. So there's maybe a couple levels that this could be taken at. So, one can take the there's kind of four levels. So one can either refute the strong position for objective morality. One can refute kind of a weak position for objective morality. One can create a strong position for objective morality, or one can create against objective morality. So I'll make a argument for why, like the strongest position for objective morality. But at any stage here, from just making my own case to refuting the other position, there, it's just interesting to note what's happening there. So the strong case for objective morality might be something, but this is a mix of the weak case and the strong case. So you can view morality as a slice of perspectives. So from any moral standpoint, you can show that that's a perspective thing. So animals may have their own morality, and that may be in conflict with humans' morality. So animals might actually, in their world, view it to be sort of a moral crime that humans are doing so well because maybe humans take up some space from their place. And then this is the strong, argument I'm going to make now, which is that this is sort of an argument against consciousness, because if consciousness doesn't exist, and this is an argument against that, then what we're looking at in the universe is just different quantities of sort of the same thing, because this is a logical argument. So the only types of things that can exist are either causal things, something where something happened as a result, and random things which happened arbitrarily and not of a result of anything. So therefore, if we look at everything happening in the universe, it's all either a result of something random or causal, and therefore it doesn't matter how you kind of look at it and slice it. It is just the same type of things. So to say, well, this one type of thing is better than this type of thing, is to make a priori assertion without any grounds or backing. And then you made the argument for, I don't know. I think that's good enough.
We'll now go into rebuttals. We will begin with the affirmative, and each participant will have 3 minutes.
Yeah, so it sounds like you're coming from a view of like, man, things are just it's kind of just a cause and effect is why we are experiencing the things we experience. But I would challenge us to say, like, man, I feel like we experience, that's not how we experience morality in reality, right? We experience morality as not an illusion, not some sort of fiction or mistake, or not just some sort of cause and effect, but it's real, it's binding, it's universal, it's serious. We don't think genocide violates my personal preference. We think, man, genocide is actually wrong. There's a level to it that is morality, and I think that there are, man, primary things that we can all agree on. Right, a mom losing her child to murder, survivals of abuse. These experiences don't leave the feeling of, man, this is wrong because it fits the story and it's just the effect of some cause. But the reality of it is that it actually feels wrong, and I think that, if morality is pretend of some sort, if it's just some sort of cause and effect, then why ought we obey it? Like, where does the ought come from? Where does the ought is, I guess, my theme word for the night. Like, why ought we obey that? I think that's good.
So there's a bit of a begging the question happening in your premise, where you say we feel like morality is objective, and where is that coming from? I don't know exactly how you said that, but it was something like, we all know intrinsically in a deep level that killing babies is wrong, but this is begging the question because the argument is it objectively wrong? You can't assume that as an axiom before to make the case. So the argument, the strong argument for non-objective morality, is one that doesn't say that on the surface level, on the pragmatic level, that we shouldn't act a certain way. It's a more epistemological and ontological argument that goes a bit deeper than that. So just because as humans we have certain rules and certain understandings about what we ought to do, doesn't imply that necessarily that's an epistemological truth, which makes it objective. Because you've shown how it's objective beyond the social level, but you haven't shown how it's objective beyond the human level. And it's entirely possible for humans to pragmatically follow morality because it's in the best interest of our species. So we um, individually want to do well. So therefore, we want to do well as a community. In order to work in a community, we have to do these things. It's our moral laws are being derived from the fact that we are human, um, and we have instinctual drives to exist and keep being human. Uh, and it doesn't go beyond that. And you haven't actually made an argument beyond that. So you have only made an argument at this point for subjective morality.
Now we will begin the Q&A section of the debate. When a society later regrets a practice it once endorsed, does that mean it was morally wrong?
So regret by itself doesn't make something wrong, but I think it can reveal that it always was wrong, right? A society changing its mind doesn't create moral wrongness. It just changes the society's beliefs. If morality were determined by cultural approval, then no society would ever truly be wrong, only different over time. So when societies regret practices like slavery or racial segregation or oppressing someone, they aren't merely saying like, oh, that no longer fits our preference. They're saying, hey, that never should have happened. And I think that language assumes a standard beyond the society itself. And this regret could also function like a moral diagnosis, like a not like some moral generator, just like realizing you're sick doesn't make you sick. Realizing a practice that you're practicing injustice doesn't make it unjust. It just reveals that it violated a moral standard that was already there. So someone might hold a non-objective view of morality. They can say it just has to do with emotion or it's pragmatic, but they lose the ability to say past societies were genuinely unjust rather than merely different. Moral progress comes from moral change, not improvement. Right? Regret makes sense if there's an objective moral standard. Societies can fail to live up to this moral standard. They recognize that failure later and rightly repent of those things, but I don't. Regret doesn't invent morality. I think it presupposes it.
Why do the same core moral prohibitions recur across time and cultures, even when violating them would be advantageous?
Okay, so things occurring across cultures might demonstrate that morality is objective in respect to a specific species in relation to logic. So, for example, you know, humans might it might be in their objective moral interest to survive, to um, work together and have certain laws. This doesn't imply that these are objective beyond that. It's still subjective to the level of species. Um, so also, you said that if you don't have sort of objective morality, you lose the ability to make strong claims of morality. But that is exactly what my position purports to do, is to eliminate the ability to make strong claims of morality. So you can say pragmatically that it's moral for us to do a certain thing, but you can't say epistemologically that it's moral for us to just do a certain thing. And it's not a necessary axiom that a theory must also have the ingredients to say, to be able to make that strong claim that morality is objective. Of just responding to that statement that you said.
What is the purpose of morality for an individual?
Morality isn't just about survival or social harmony or personal preference. I think those things describe why people behave a certain way, but they don't explain why someone should do the right thing, even when it costs them. Morality answers the ought question, right? Morality gives us moral obligation outside of ourselves. It tells me what actions are truly right or wrong, regardless of how I feel, my desires, convenience, or social approval. Morality also grounds individuals to responsibility and accountability. It shows that we're real moral agents capable of blame, guilt, repentance, and growth. These things only make sense if our choices actually matter. This morality is rooted in the unchanging nature of God. God is the ultimate source of being, goodness, and purpose. These moral truths are not arbitrary commandments, they flow from God's unchanging nature. Moral values, goodness, justice, love, they come from God's unchanging character. Moral duties, the things we ought to do, they come from God's commands. And I think Jesus is a standard of morality that we've all fallen short of, right? All have sinned. We all live lives immorally. We all do things that are immoral. And the wages of that sin is death. And we need a Savior that is Jesus. So the purpose for morality is living closer to that standard. Morality gives us the ought because it's an obligation. It's a obligation outside of ourselves. I'm done.
Okay, the purpose of morality for an individual, objectively for them within the frameworks of their existence, would be from a Peterson model to make their life as good as possible, to make the lives of the people around them and rippling out to society. And so it is a person is nested in society, therefore dependent on it, and therefore, even though it's subjective to their experience, they benefit from society's benefit. So the they are linked. And this ought idea that uh, that we ought to do something cannot be derived from a is. This is a cliche, but if you want to do that, you would have to show how. So grounding it in theism, I think it's interesting to note that if morality does come from God, then in some sense you could say maybe then it's not actually objective as well. I mean, this is something really difficult to argue because if you take God as an axiom, you're supposing a bunch of things. But so if morality is grounded in God, that means that it's not sort of, it's like if you're a parent and you give your kid a rule, like don't do this, don't walk over here. If it's only existing because you say it's existing, is it really objective, or is it just a subjective to God? Maybe it sounds ridiculous, but to get at that theistic perspective, those are just some ideas.
What is the purpose of morality for a society?
Yeah, so I like that you addressed that ought question. I do think that morality gives us an ought individually. I think that God setting the standard of morality makes it it makes it outside of ourselves, making it an objective standard for all people. I think it's the same for societies, right? It gives us that ought. It's not a social tool for cooperation. Societies can cooperate, like cooperation happens with fear, coercion, self-interest, but I think morality does something deeper. It tells societies what they ought to protect, what they ought to punish, what they ought to honor. Morality in society grounds justice. Like without morality, law collapses into might makes right. And also, morality affirms human dignity, right? The moral framework of a society can answer the question, who counts? Who of these people matter? Right? This framework presupposes changing feelings, emotions, and things of the sort. It's something outside of ourselves. It's something objective that we can appeal to. And finally, I think morality makes critique and reform possible in societies. Societies don't just change flavors; like they claim to improve. We watch them improve. Abolition, civil rights, protectors of the weak, like these things have moved. We've said they've made moral progress, and this only makes sense if society can be compared to a standard outside of itself. Like what is it being compared to? What is the objective standard that it's improving towards? Morality is not just social stability, right? It restrains power, guides law, allows societies to repent, reform, pursue justice, rather than just redefining, reshaping society like some sort of Play-Doh or clay. Morality gives society a compass. It's not just a consensus or an agreement of a bunch. So I'm done.
So purpose of morality for society is in some sense just to keep being a society. Like any evolutionary product, the thing that is wants to get its genes as far into the future as possible, as Brett Weinstein would say, and thus is the same with society. Morality for society is subjective to society, and it is an attempt to get it as far into the future as possible. Um, these arguments for theism, they're somewhat redundant in a way because we already get all the imperatives, all we have a desire for morality, and we get that entirely through evolutionary biology. And so to add on top of it sort of a necessity for objective morality, I also notice you're making kind of a claim that because it's very useful and we need it, that therefore somehow it makes us objective. But again, the utility of something says nothing about its epistemological soundness. So we have no necessity. Additionally, even though we don't need it, even though necessity doesn't imply any objective nature, we don't have necessity to ground out morality in objective truth, because it's good enough to say subjectively to society we have moral oughts because we want to exist intrinsically. And also there's a sort of an obfuscation, messed up the word, but of what objective means. Objective doesn't mean outside of yourself. It means true, like math is true.
Let's go into our closing statements from each side. Each participant will have 3 minutes.
Yes, you brought up like evolution is like us. What is it? What is the word you said? Getting to the future. Like I guess evolutionary track, getting to the future. I hope I'm representing that your statement correctly. It's like getting to the future is like, and I think that like what is good, right? The objective standard you said is not outside of ourselves, but it's something that's right. That it's objectively right, like math is right objectively. And so I think that getting to the future or evolutionary tract or some sort of survival of the fittest or survival of whatever best fits survival, I think that also presupposes objectiveness that is good. Like why is survival good? Why is getting to the future a good thing? Why should everything do what's right to get to the future? And if that's what's good, like I think that presupposes an objective thing above itself, that good is right, that survival is right, that getting to the future is right. Whenever if there is no objective good, then none of that matters. And so I think the ought also just kind of disappears. And with that, I think that, man, if we look at societies and look at the survival of things, like if we don't have an objective good that is right, we can't call anyone, any abolitionist movements, MLK, whatever, we can't say that's moral progress because that presupposes there's a good right. Like there's something that is objectively right. There is something that is right above the society. And so I think that we can just say like, okay, Nazi Germany was wrong in, the 1900s, but they're right now. It's like, well, we can't say that. It's just a change of taste if there's no objective standard of good, because what are we comparing it to in that case? Like, where does this desire for morality come from if there is not an objective standard? And if there is a place where it comes from, whether it be feelings or beliefs that come through evolution, okay, then why ought we follow it? Why ought we do what was right? And it's like, okay, is that because we want to get to the future more? We want to, I think you use the term of like, for survival of the species or whatever it might be. Why ought we get there? Like what's the point of getting there if there is no objective standard of good? And so I think that it doesn't generate that ought, right? There's no moral obligation. There might be moral feelings or beliefs, but there's no obligation. So I do think there is an objective right, and I think that right comes from God. I think it comes from the theistic view. There are commands. I think that's a personal God. I think that He's walking through this life with us, right? I think the moral standard comes from the good and the perfection. It comes from Jesus Christ. So yeah, thank you.
So I am playing devil's advocate in the position I'm taking, but I'm not playing devil's advocate in the arguments I'm putting forward, because I don't think that the arguments that you give are sufficient at this level, because you keep sort of begging the question, which is you keep saying like, well, even if it is just evolutionarily advantageous for us to do it, then why do we feel the necessity to do it? Why is it an absolute truth? But you're begging the question because you're assuming that it's an absolute truth, because we can get animals acting out things without it being objective truth. We see animals act out immoral things all the time instinctually. And so just because we have a impulse to do something doesn't imply that that there is necessarily a grounding out epistemological reality behind that. So I think that there's a necessity for a much stronger argument than just this. And yeah, I mean, I feel like maybe that's what I'll say, because that point I think is pretty critical, because there hasn't been a building. Yeah, I guess I will keep going. There hasn't been a building of that argument to sufficient standards, and there also really hasn't been a refutation of the argument I made. So the argument that you presented doesn't hold up because it just kind of pushes the thing back a bit farther. And then the argument I've made hasn't been properly refuted, which is that every species has a objective morality, which is subjective from a larger scale, but objective to them because for their survival and their instinctual desire, it grounds out in logic. And this hasn't been refuted. This is an argument for non-objective morality, for why certain principles constantly arise in culture where you see the same patterns throughout culture. Well, it's because each species grounds out their morality in logic. Doesn't mean it's objective. It just means it's subjective, and there's logical rules that they want to follow to stay alive. Which, again, to stay alive, there's no deep epistemological requirement for staying alive to be a necessary ought. It's just what they're doing. It's just what we're doing.
That concludes the debate. Thank you to both sides for a thoughtful exchange, and thank you to everyone listening.